Hi and welcome to the second Happy Horsemanship Podcast. My name is S1E2. You might know me from my Instagram. It's my goal to make horses more happy, and you can even follow my Happy Horsemanship course. Today, and in more podcasts to come, I am answering a training question. I got this on a question box in a story on my Instagram. I posted a few weeks ago because I already had the idea of recording some podcasts, and this is where I will start answering them. So the question for today's podcast, and I'm new to this, so maybe I'll even get a second question in today's podcast, but I'll try to just really go into this subject because I think it is a very nice question to answer in a podcast. So let's see how far we'll get. Today's question is how to get a horse to calmly walk over poles instead of jumping them. And when I saw this question, I immediately thought of some lessons I had a few months ago, and I had a few lessons on the same day where all the horses were scared of the pole. And I use poles for so many exercises. You can find them on my Instagram. I actually made like subjects on my Instagram, like little folders. If you go to the hashtag hhtv from Happy Horsemanship TV, hhtvpoles, then you'll go to all the illustrations, reels, posts I ever made about or with poles. So if you ever want some inspiration in that, you can also go to my highlights. I have a highlight with just a hashtag, and in that you can find all the folders, all the hashtags I made. And if you click on them, you go to all the posts I've made about that subject. So I also have hhtv cones, or hhtv vertical balance, or hhtv confidence. So just a tip. They're all free, of course. They're just on Instagram. Back to the question about the poles. So I use them a lot, and at that specific day on the lessons, there was already a really low jump in the arena, and it was a very cold day because the arena was frozen. So we weren't really able to do much, but I still wanted, because I think the goal of that lesson was a little bit more of body awareness. So I asked the girl on her horse to go over the really, really low jump. It was basically just a ground pole. And the horse at first didn't want to go, and then eventually sprinted over it, which was very interesting. And in a lesson after that, I wanted to use the pole because the owner wanted to learn the split, or to teach her horse a split, and I often use a pole to help the horse understand that he shouldn't move his hind feet when the owner asks the front feet towards her or him. And that horse was also not able to stand still on top of the pole. And both owners told me that the previous owners or trainers did this thing, and I really didn't even know that was a thing, where every time the horse would jump, someone would lift the pole at the second the horse would jump, so that it would touch, maybe even hurt the horse on his feet or his legs, and to make it jump higher and higher next time, because of course the horse would be afraid of getting hurt by the pole, which is very cruel because horses just don't understand, and I wouldn't even expect the pole to move. So a pole turns into this very unsafe, unpredictable, hurtful object. And then to expect a horse to slowly walk over it or stand still on it is impossible at that moment. Of course, I believe that every horse with trauma like that can learn to feel confident around poles again. But of course, it depends on how big of a trauma it is and how deep it is, and of course the type of horse as well. Some horses are easier over it than others. And that could be one of the reasons why the person who asked this question is having problems with calmly walking over poles instead of jumping them, because it sounds to me that when she calmly wants to walk over the poles, her horse rushes to it and jumps them. And you see that a lot. And to go back to the basics, before I go to the 3 possible problems that I have in my mind for this problem, before I do that, my very sweet dog is sleeping next to me, and I hear that she might start barking in her sleep. So if you hear some weird squeaky sounds, it's just Poissy, and a snore. I'm not sure if my microphone will pick up on it, but she's very wiggling all over the place with her tongue out of her face. It's just my Australian Shepherd. So the 3 possible problems, it can be that the horse is not balanced enough to calmly walk over a pole. The poles may also be too far away from each other, which is of course struggling if you're already not very balanced or aware of your own body. It's a problem. The second problem could be that the horse just doesn't understand that you just want him to walk slowly and calmly over it. And a third problem might be that it's scared and traumatized. I'll go back to the first and then we'll dive deeper into each problem and how to fix them. Of course, it's easier to show you than to tell you. So this is where I'll advise you to check out my course, the Happy Horsemanship course. You can find it at happyhorsemanship.tv/course. And I also talk about problems like this. There's a whole module called problem solving, and there at the top of my head, it's 20 or 25 lessons just about problem solving. What to do when your horse bites, what to do when your horse bucks, things like that. And this fits in perfectly. So the whole course is about understanding your horse, fixing problems you might be having right now, and preventing them in the future. The 3 things in this, the not balanced, the not understanding, and the being scared, are all things, are all things that can be solved when you follow the course. I will teach you how to solve it. I also offer live Q&As in that frequently, a few times a month, once a month, every few times a month. And you can even ask your personal questions in that so I can really help you and your horse improve. So the first possible problem is that the horse isn't feeling balanced enough. Like I said, it can be that he is just not balanced enough, even if you place the poles in a good distance. But it can also be that you maybe place them in a too short of a distance or too big. I get this question a lot too. Like, how far away of each other do you place the poles? I usually with Aslan do just a meter, which is a big step and a bit. So a big step and a foot. Just to make it internationally understandable with all the different measurement metric systems. So a meter and 10 centimeters, or a big step and a small step, is usually what I start with. It usually works fine with Aslan. When I used to give lessons, I would start with this as well, and then of course, usually with lessons, there's always different horses, different sizes horses with different sizes steps they make between poles. So I would usually try to find like a way to make it most comfortable for all of them, for all of the different horses, which means I don't really follow the exact meter and 10 centimeters that I was taught at my my study to become a instructor, which fits Aslan but doesn't fit all horses, of course. So you just have to place them in a way where you think, okay, my horse is this size, he makes this size of steps, let's try it this way. And then after you go around it for like a few, and this is the trotting distance. I usually let Aslan walk over it when it's already in the trotting distance, and I don't really canter over the poles. So when you trot it over it a few times, then you can see, okay, is he constantly touching the poles or struggling with the paces or the distance of his steps, the size of his steps? Then you might want to adjust something. And it can also be that you might just have too many poles, because of course the more poles, the more of a challenge it is for your horse to find his distance between all those poles. So you might just want to start with one pole, maybe 2 or 3, because more than that is already a challenge for a lot of horses. So just try and see where you can go with your horse. And then I would recommend starting with like a meter, like a big step and a small step between the poles. So that is the solution to the first problem. If your horse is not very balanced, then try playing around with how big of a distance you place between the poles, and also how many poles you place there. Then the second possible problem is that your horse is simply not understanding what you want him to do, that you want him to go over it calmly. He might just feel excited, or really just thinks you want him to jump over it when you don't want to, but maybe your cues are a bit too big, which causes your horse to jump instead of calmly walk. You can try making your cues very, very, very small and see if your horse follows with that. So, of course, the smallest you can go is just standing still. Maybe standing still on the other side of the pole with your horse on liberty, and just calmly, I would, of course, create some distance just in case your horse jumps over it still a bit stressed. So make sure you're in a safe position, and then very calmly, very relaxed, call his name, and try to really show him how calmly that can be done. And then hopefully your horse will choose to go over the pole, but he might choose to go around it, which is really smart, especially. And it's also showing that he might feel a little bit anxious or tensed around that pole. It might not mean that he is as scared and traumatized as the third problem, but he could just feel a little tensed. And that's easier to fix than being very scared. You just have to make sure that the pole is a fun place. And this is we're already going towards the solution to the third problem as well. So I'll just stay at the not understanding problem for a second longer, because if it is a communication problem, then try to have your energy very low. Make sure he doesn't feel trapped between something. Because of course, you see a lot of people who turn it into like a little funnel where the horse has to go between ropes in order to jump. If you want jumping to be a relaxing, happy moment, then don't do that. I would advise you, and I would advise everyone to do this. Also the horses who just struggle with their balance and not really struggle with this mentally, to place the poles not at the fence, but a little bit more into the arena, so that your horse can choose to go around the poles at either side, at the side where you're standing on or at the side of the fence. So he doesn't feel trapped, he doesn't feel like he has to go over those poles. You can do it in liberty to make sure he can really tell what he thinks, that he can really use his voice, to maybe say, I don't want to do this, I don't like this, it's making me tensed, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And you can even actually turn the pole into a target. And that's also something I did with Aslan. And now I'm mostly struggling with making sure he doesn't go into a too small of a circle to go back to the pole or jump immediately, because he likes jumping so much now that he would prefer to just make as tiny of a circle as possible, to just jump as much as he can, because he knows that when he jumps very nicely or very high or very fast, with a lot of energy and activeness at least, then I usually click and give him a treat. So I use clicker training to turn the pole into something very positive, and also connecting that with my personal problem with Aslan, with the motivation to help him move around, or at least finding that motivation inside him, because he is a energy saver. He prefers to go slowly and calmly. I basically have the opposite problem of what we're dealing with in this podcast. But yes, I turned the pole or the jump into a target which Aslan can earn treats with. Not every time, but only when he does it better or more active or more enthusiastic than the previous rounds. Then I give a click and a treat. So that is something, if the communication is the biggest struggle you have, then this is something you can try. But if the pole is already a bit of a scary situation with just it being there on the ground, then you might want to listen to the third possible problem, which is, of course, the horses being scared or even traumatized by the methods that I talked about earlier, which I obviously don't agree with. So how you can solve that, and of course this will take longer than solving the previous problems, because it might be very deep into your horse. I'm assuming that you didn't do this to your horse, that you didn't use that method with training. So it might have been years ago that your horse has experienced something like that, but it can still be something he is afraid of. Unpredictableness, the unsafeness, the painfulness of what the pole used to do to your horse. And what I would do with that is turn the pole into anything but jumping material. And to hopefully with the goal of being able to actually use them as jumping material or as trotting poles or whatever later. But your horse has to really understand, I can do anything with that pole. It will stay underground. It's nothing to be afraid of. It won't hurt me anymore, maybe. So, like I said, you can find many exercises with poles on hashtag hhtvpoles. You can find that on Instagram. But I'll just share some with you right now, right here. So one of the exercises I shared and has been shared a lot by my Instagram followers, maybe you, is the one where you can leg yield over the poles. And I actually made a challenge, which is of course very challenging, to place poles in a pentagon with of course 5 poles then, and to leg yield in a circle around it, where you place the front legs of the horse on one side of the poles and the hind legs on the other side of the poles, and to have the poles staying in the middle of the front and the hind legs. What I've seen in the videos and what I can already tell you, if your horse is actually scared of the poles, is that this is too much then. It's a challenge, it's a difficult exercise. So start with just walking with your horse around the pole, not even over it. Maybe even just doing your normal trainings with a pole being there in the middle of the arena. Not for him to go over, but just for him to see that it won't move, that it will stay where it is. And then maybe you can, in the cooling down, go over it. But maybe just not in the middle where you would normally go over a pole, but maybe right on the end. So that maybe not even the whole horse is going over it, but just one little hoof is going a little bit closer to the pole than the rest of the body. Assuming that your horse is really tensed and scared around it. And then you can try to go a little bit more towards the middle of the pole. And to, of course, reward your horse when he does that. And to encourage him to lick and chew, to process what he's doing, what he's learning, to really help him understand nothing is happening, you're doing great. And you can encourage that licking and chewing, of course, with just giving a treat. So reward your horse in a way that's actually rewarding to your horse, because we like to pet our horses, and it's just like that. We like to pet our horses. A lot of horses don't really enjoy being petted, especially not on their head, which is where we prefer to pet our horses. So check if your horse really finds being petted a reward. Scratches, on the other hand, might be a reward for your horse. Aslan never has scratches, so I can't really use that. He is really mostly motivated when I give him treats. Or when I allow him to do tricks he really enjoys showing off. So for him, the pedestal is a great reward for between exercises in our training. So find something that is really rewarding for your horse and use that whenever you go near that pole. Also, if just assuming that your horse does have some really negative experiences with a pole, try to not overdo it. Really, just 1 minute of an exercise near a pole can be enough for the rest of the day. I wouldn't even do it every day, especially if you just try to look at your horse. Do you see stress signals? Do you see wrinkles around the eyes, the nose, the mouth? Do you see different behaviors than your horse normally shows? Is he really building up some tension? Then don't do it for a couple days. Just because you just really want to build positive experiences around the pole. Don't force him, listen to him, make it all very nice and calm, because that's your goal, for him to calmly walk over it, and you can't rush that. So if you've done that for a few times and your horse is feeling a little bit more confident, and you can also do some other confidence exercises. You can check that out at #hhtvconfidence on Instagram, because that will help your horse as well. But I also am brain games, because they help with the problem solving skill, which also helps your horse deal with things they are scared or tensed around. You can find ideas on that on Instagram at #hhtvbraingames. So those are some things you can do on the days that you don't even use the pole. You can also use the pole for brain games. You can place it on, maybe not the sand because you want to use treats around it then, but you can use it on a stone and then place treats around it and allow your horse to search for the treats around it. Just simple as that. But it can really help your horse understand, okay, this thing is actually not that big of a deal. It's fine to be around, it doesn't move, it doesn't hurt me. I can even earn treats around it, which your horse probably really likes. So those are some ways you can make the pole more interesting, more fun again, to really turn it into a fun training advice, a training tool, again, instead of something to be afraid of. Once you see that your horse is getting confidence, feeling relaxed around the pole again, you can maybe place another pole or 2 poles near it and just allow your horse to, maybe like the Mikado game, where you have multiple poles and your horse can walk over it in multiple ways. You can do that, but with a little bit more distance between it, because usually with Mikado, just like the actual Mikado game, you basically make the most random way of placing poles on a pile, just like you would if you would, because of course with the poles you don't place them vertically and let them go, because poles are a little bit more heavier and expensive and you don't want them to break or damage. So you just place them randomly, just like with the game. And then with Mikado, with the actual Mikado exercise that you can see on my Instagram often, and also in my course, and I think maybe also in my YouTube channel, you can see that I place poles over each other, which of course makes it more challenging. But for your horse, when he's afraid of the poles, place some distance between those poles so that your horse can still find ways to find his comfort zone again, to not step on a pole when he doesn't feel ready for that, to find that calmness around those poles. And if you see that he is showing too many stress signals, too much tension, then go back a few steps again, or don't use the poles for a week or 2. And then you can try again. You can also do the actual leg yielding, and if your horse can leg yield over 1 pole, you can do it over 2 and even place them in a little corner so that you can steer around a little bit more. So you can make the poles into a nice exercise where your horse has to think, and he can improve his body awareness and his problem-solving skill, and he can feel confident, and you can both improve your communication towards each other and understand each other better. So many benefits either way. And then you can finally slowly start using them in your trainings, on the lunge or whatever, and see how that goes. And again, if he's showing too much tension, then go back a few steps and just start slowly building it up again until a point where you might have one pole on the circle when you lunge, and see how that goes. And maybe then add a second pole on the other end of the circle so that your horse has to go a half a circle and then reach to another pole again. And you can even, if you see that he's getting tensed again a little bit, you can try to make your horse focus back on you and ask for transitions every time he reaches a pole. To really help him understand, oh, okay, I get an assignment now, I can do an exercise, and then I can, of course, earn rewards with that, either treats or a fun exercise or some scratches, to again make that pole a really nice tool in your trainings, that your horse really understands when he sees the poles in the arena or in the round pen, that he's like, yeah, let's do those pole exercises again, those are fun. And that's your goal, I think, in every training, to just have fun together in a relaxed, exciting, fun way. I think that is everything I wanted to say about how to get a horse to calmly walk over poles instead of jumping them. I did it. I filled the whole podcast. I think I won't use another question. Thank you for sending me this question. If you have another question, or if you have questions about your trainings with your horse and you want them to be used in a podcast as well, let me know. If you don't want them to be used in a podcast, let me know as well. I will still be happy to answer them for you. Just go to my Instagram, Happy Horsemanship TV, and send me a DM, because they're always open. I'm always happy to help. If you want to learn more about my way of working, if you want to learn more about exercises with poles, how to build your horse's confidence, his body awareness, make him feel happy, understand him, because of course with every problem you have, the first thing you have to do is understand why you have this problem. And if you can read your horse, the stress signals, the body language, then you can solve your own problems, even the ones in the future, or even prevent them. So if you want that, if you think, yeah, that sounds good, then check out the Happy Horsemanship course. You can go to happyhorsemanship.tv/course, and you can find all the information. The more than 100 lessons are all in a list where you can find what every lesson is about. So you can really see, okay, do I want to learn all this? Then the course is for you. But again, send me a DM with any of your questions, and I would love to hear what you thought of this podcast. Again, just like last time, if you have any advice or tips or whatever on how I can make my podcast more interesting or fun to listen to, I would love to hear that, because this is still very new to me. But I'm having a lot of fun recording it, and I hope you can hear that as well. And I would love to see you again in the next podcast. Do you say see? Here, I would love to have you listen to my next podcast.